Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of our Seder plays. This is a series of short videos in which I'm interviewing some of our Kingston Liberal Synagogue members about their Seder plates and Pesach traditions. And I'm really pleased today because I'm joined by Stephanie, and Stephanie literally grew up with KLS because her parents were founder members. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some stories about that as well. So thank you for joining me, Stephanie. And
very welcome.
Let's have a look at your Seder plate.
Right. This might be a little bit of a surprise to people. Here it is.
Oh, cute.
Yes, as you can see, it's not a sort of traditional one. It's very much a child's one.
So tell us about that. How did that come about?
Right. So this is a Seder plate that I bought for Joshua, who most people will know is our son. I'm not sure exactly how old he was, but he was probably no more than about 6 or 7, because we didn't have anything at home. And also it was one that he could paint himself. So it was a kit. He got the plate, he got the paints, and he painted it quite well for a 7-year-old boy at the time. The other thing is, it reminds me very much of a period of about 3 years when Joshua was at primary school, and his deputy head teacher at the time phoned me up out of the blue. I didn't really know her very well. And she said, I know you're a Jewish family. I said, yes. She said, we're actually doing a lesson in a few weeks' time called the Seder plate. And I smiled. And she said, do you think that's something that you would be able to come in and help out with? Come and do a lesson? So I said, well, if you tell me a little bit about it, possibly. And I actually had 3 years worth of 60 children, so 180 children, that I came and did a lesson for about the Seder and the Seder plate. And it was great fun. I took in the plate, and I actually borrowed one from the synagogue as well to show them a more traditional one.
Yeah.
And I put all the symbolic foods on the plate for them so they could see everything. Of course, none of the children had seen any of these before. And they told me that they'd been learning about the story of the Exodus. And I said, okay, you've seen all the things on the plate now, we described them. And I said, you're going to tell me the story, you're going to act out the story. And they had great fun. And then I said, after that, I'm going to ask you a few questions about the things you've just seen on the Seder plate and how they might connect with the story. So I'll try and make it brief, because I could probably talk about this for half an hour, because the kids were so great. And they acted it out, and we had our Joseph and we had our slaves. We had our slaves and our Moses, And at the end, they were great. I mean, they guessed, they made really good guesses and educated guesses, and they worked it all out. And then I had my box of matzah. It was over from Pesach, because actually this lesson took place, I think, at the end of May, just after half term. I mean, they didn't do it at the time, it just fitted in with the syllabus. And so I broke up the matzahs thinking, because to me, by this stage of my life, matzah wasn't something particularly exciting, it was traditional, and we ate, but the kids went mad for it. So they just could not get enough of this matzah. And it was repeated every single year. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the kids loving the matzah.
They loved it. They were mad. They loved it. But for me, when you asked me to come and do an interview about the Seder plate, actually, that's what came to mind, because that was literally the name of their lesson.
Oh, I see. Right. Excellent. Yeah, that's really sweet.
And I think possibly because I don't have the family tradition of the Seder plate, that is something that's just, for me, become quite a big thing, really.
Well, let's talk about that, because you've mentioned that already, and I also know, as I said earlier in the introduction, you literally grew up with KLS because your parents were founder members. So I understand for you, your kind of Seder traditions growing up was actually the KLS communal Seder. Is that right?
It was.
So tell us a little bit about your memories of that.
Yeah, I mean, first night was literally all about food. We always had the traditional meal. We always had the chicken soup and the homemade knedlach and the chicken and everything else. But for me, that was just that. The next night, from probably the age of 8 years old, was all about the Seder, which was the communal Seder.
Yeah.
And from very early on, my mum was heavily involved in that, because there was a team of women, probably from what was then called the Women's Society,
Yep.
headed by Pamela Fletcher Jones. And a lot of people will still either remember her or know her name.
I definitely know her name. I don't remember how it was before my time,
Yeah.
but I definitely know the name.
And, everything was done. The communal Seder, we didn't have a building at that time. So the communal Seder took place often in a different public place each year, from Surbiton Assembly Rooms to the I've forgotten, the Vera Fletcher Hall in Thames Ditton, and the United Reformed Church in Kingston. I mean, it seemed to move to a different place each year. And I had my favourites, and some I liked more or less.
Yeah.
And I just remember sort of all the egg boiling and all the almond pudding making, and a bit of competition there. And Phil Hyman knows exactly what I mean there. And I used to, I remember... Oh goodness, I remember going and helping laying the tables, and it was very much it was very regimented. Everything had to be just so, and it always looked absolutely beautiful. And we had we didn't have caterers, sorry, but we had ladies to wait on us. I mean, all the synagogue ladies prepared the food, and they did a brilliant job, and we laid the tables with help from your kids or any hangers-oners. And then once we sat down for the evening, apart from either Pam Fletcher Jones, or my mum later on, who were sort of on guard because it was their baby, the rest of us just sat back, and these ladies who were hired came and brought our food and took it away, cleared up. And it was just a lovely, lovely evening. We used to have huge seders. So we had rows and rows of these very long tables. And when my brother is 8 years younger than me. So I remember he was 2, and he was somehow or other allowed to have the kiddish wine, the 4 cups. And he ended up under the table.
That's one of the best stories we've had. The drunk 2-year-old.
I remember dressing up for it, as a little girl. I remember sort of all the little dresses that I put on for it. Aww. And much as people would in their own families. And I always enjoyed it. It was a really, and also in those days as a child, going to what we called religion school. In fact, in the beginning we called it Sunday school. Very anglicized. We always had readings, and kids in that, I don't know, I think kids in those days were very disciplined. We had to behave, but we all had our readings, and that happened each year as well. So yeah, I have very fond memories of it.
That's brilliant. It's brilliant to hear about that, because obviously it's something we still do. I mean, the second night communal Seder is still a huge part of our community. Now, obviously last year that had to be online, and we're just coming out now to our second online Pesach. So what are your thoughts about our second Pesach in lockdown?
I think I'm fairly resigned to it. I wish it were otherwise, but I don't feel terribly sad. I just feel it's going to happen with optimism in the air, because at the moment, I hope I'm right in saying that we should be, or can be, reasonably confident that this will be the last one in lockdown. And I also know that you and others at the synagogue are preparing something exciting for us to have for our online second night. Maybe because, maybe because I don't have this family tradition, I don't feel that I'm missing maybe what the majority of people are missing. That's also a possibility. Because also as I've got older, and think as an adult, it's something that I have had slight sort of feelings of sadness about, that we haven't had a family Seder. So maybe that means I've got less to miss.
That's it. I mean, that's a really good point, Stephanie. And of course, even last year we still had the communal Seder. It wasn't the same. It was everybody on Zoom,
but it was still a fantastic feeling of being able to come together in spite of everything.
Exactly.
And the other thing is that one thing that I haven't mentioned that was incredibly important growing up was all the Pesach food. And my mum was a good cook and she was a great baker. So we always had the lovely food. We had all the coconut pyramids and the cinnamon balls and the matzo puddings and the almond pudding. You know, we had lots and lots of food. So that's something that I will be doing. And obviously everyone who's at home, if they choose to, can still do that.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it for me as well.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, there's a tinge of sadness, but not too much. I'm more,
and like you say, hopefully it'll be the last one in lockdown.
I hope so.
But we'll certainly, like you say, we'll certainly all be eating, and we'll certainly be together in a virtual way. So
I really, but I still look forward to next year when we can.
Really next year's going to be amazing, I think, when we're all back together. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. It's lovely to hear about the communal Seders past, because, you know,
I love them.
They're part of our community now, but they always have been. So it's lovely that you actually grew up with them and to hear about them from your kind of child's eye view, including your drunk 2-year-old brother as well. That's something that I'll remember from this. Anyway, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for sharing your Seder plate with us.
Thank you for inviting me, and it was a pleasure, as always.